It was the final hours of New Year's Eve, and the city was alive with the sounds of celebration. Everywhere, people were dressed in glittering outfits, holding sparklers and counting down the seconds until midnight. The streets were alive with cheer, but not everyone felt the magic of the moment. In the quiet corner of a small neighborhood, a man named Jack sat in his old, beat-up car, parked at the side of a dimly lit street. His fingers gripped the steering wheel, and his eyes stared blankly ahead. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his face showed the exhaustion of a man who had been running on empty for far too long. Jack had tried to get a good job, to fix his life, to make it work for his young daughter, Emily, who was waiting for him at home. But the last few years had been brutal. Bills piled up, and every effort seemed to lead to more failure. As the world around him buzzed with celebration, Jack sat frozen in time. He couldn't join in. The past few months had been filled with unpaid rent, overdue bills, and constant worry about how he would make ends meet. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Jack felt a deep sense of hopelessness settle over him. He was just about to turn the key and drive home to his empty apartment when something caught his eye, a small, handwritten sign posted outside a local restaurant, "Free hot meal for anyone in need." Jack's stomach growled, but it wasn't the food he needed, it was something more. He needed hope. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone out there cared. He got out of the car, his steps heavy with the weight of his worries, and walked toward the small cafe. Inside, the warmth of the restaurant contrasted with the cold night outside. The smell of roasted chicken, fresh bread, and spices filled the air. The place wasn't packed, most of the tables were empty, but the owner, a kind-looking woman named Maria, greeted Jack with a warm smile. She didn't ask questions. She simply handed him a hot plate of food, set a cup of coffee in front of him, and told him to enjoy. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt like he mattered. It wasn't just the food, though he hadn't had a proper meal in weeks, it was the kindness that seemed to overflow from Maria's actions. She didn't look at him with pity, but with empathy, as though she knew exactly what he needed without saying a word. Maria shared that she'd been running the restaurant for over a decade and had made it a tradition to offer free meals on New Year's Eve to anyone struggling. It was her way of giving back to the community. She told Jack that kindness, no matter how small, could create ripples that reached far beyond what anyone could imagine. Little did she know, her small act of kindness would change Jack's life in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. But Jack had one more challenge to face. As midnight approached, he had to decide what kind of future he wanted for himself and his daughter. Would he continue in the endless cycle of struggle, or would he find a way to fight back against the hardships? As the countdown to the new year began, Jack's heart stirred with a sense of possibility. This was the night of change, he could feel it. A small act of kindness had given him a taste of hope, and as the clock struck 12, Jack realized that the greatest gift he could give to his daughter wasn't just providing for her, but showing her that, even in the darkest times, kindness had the power to light the way. In that moment, Jack made a silent vow to never give up and to pay the kindness forward. A small act of kindness that saved a struggling father on New Year's night. Jack sat alone in the small restaurant, his plate of food almost untouched, his mind still trapped in the harsh realities of his life. Maria had gone back to the kitchen, leaving him with only the sounds of clinking dishes and the occasional hum of the overhead lights. It wasn't that the food wasn't good, it was delicious. But Jack's mind raced with thoughts of his daughter, Emily. He hadn't seen her in 2 days. His financial struggles had kept him away from her for longer than he cared to admit. She was always asking when he would be home, when they could go to the park, or when they would have their little movie night again. The guilt of letting her down gnawed at him, and tonight, with the promise of a new year, it felt even more unbearable. Jack had never been one to ask for help. He was proud, stubborn, and always believed that if he just worked harder, things would improve. But the weight of his failures was crushing him. The factory job he worked at barely paid the rent, and the debt collectors had become a constant presence in his life, leaving him with little hope. His once strong relationship with Emily had become strained, and he often felt that he was losing touch with the one thing he loved most. As he stared down at his untouched meal, Jack wondered if he was making any difference in her life. He tried his best, but the truth was hard to ignore. There were nights when he didn't have enough money for groceries, let alone little treats for Emily. And now, as the year drew to a close, Jack realized that he had never felt more lost. The promise of a fresh start in the new year seemed far out of reach. How could he make a new beginning when the weight of the past kept him shackled to the present? The hum of the restaurant's clock reminded him that the new year was nearly here. Jack glanced around, noting that the few patrons who had come in for the free meal had already left, content with the kindness Maria had extended to them. He felt out of place, as if his troubles were too big to be solved by something as simple as a hot meal and a smile. Yet, there was something about the way Maria had treated him, with dignity and respect, that lingered in his mind. It was a small gesture, but it had sparked something in him, something he hadn't felt in months, a flicker of hope. "Are you all right?" Maria's voice broke through his thoughts as she appeared at his side. Jack looked up, startled by her sudden presence. Her expression was warm, but there was a softness in her eyes that told him she wasn't just making small talk. "I'm fine," Jack replied quickly, not wanting to burden her with his troubles. "Just thinking." Maria smiled and sat down across from him, her hands resting gently on the table. "I understand," she said, her voice steady in understanding. "The holidays can be hard for some people. But you don't have to go through it alone, you know. We all need a little help now and then." Jack swallowed hard. He hadn't expected her to be so perceptive. He was a stranger to her, just another face in the crowd of people she helped. Yet she treated him like someone who mattered, someone worth taking the time to listen to. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt seen. "I don't know what to do anymore," he confessed, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I've tried everything, working extra hours, picking up odd jobs, but nothing seems to work. I'm so tired, Maria. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. And I hate that I can't be the father Emily needs me to be." Maria's eyes softened, and she leaned in slightly. "You're doing the best you can," she said, her voice low but reassuring. "And sometimes, the best you can do is enough, Jack. You're still here. You haven't given up on her, and that's what matters." Jack felt the weight of her words sink in, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe them. He had been so focused on what he couldn't provide, so consumed by the failures and the weight of his struggles, that he hadn't taken a moment to appreciate the little victories, the moments when he simply showed up. Emily still had him. And he would do everything in his power to keep showing up for her. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Jack's internal turmoil began to shift. He didn't have all the answers. He couldn't magically fix everything overnight. But he could make a decision. A decision to keep trying, to keep pushing forward, and to never let go of the bond he shared with Emily. That was a start, and that was enough. Just as the countdown to the new year began, Maria stood up and walked over to the restaurant's window. Jack joined her, his heart heavy with the weight of his thoughts but also lighter with the newfound sense of hope. The street outside was bathed in the glow of fireworks and distant celebrations. The city seemed to be alive with possibility, as if the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for the first moment of the new year to arrive. "Happy New Year, Jack," Maria said, her voice soft and full of warmth. Jack looked at her, a small but genuine smile tugging at his lips. "Happy New Year, Maria." "Thank you." The clock struck midnight, and for the first time in a long while, Jack felt a sense of peace. The challenges he faced weren't gone, but he no longer felt alone in facing them. Maria's kindness had reminded him of something crucial: he didn't have to face the world's hardships on his own. Small acts of kindness, like the one Maria had shown him, had the power to change everything. Maybe he couldn't solve all of his problems in one night, but he could start fresh. And that was enough. As Jack left the restaurant, he took a deep breath of the crisp night air, the sounds of celebration still echoing in the distance. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to walk it. He was determined to make the most of the new year and be the father Emily deserved. But the road was far from smooth. When Jack returned home, he found a letter in his mailbox, an eviction notice. The weight of the world seemed to settle back on his shoulders. The relief he had felt in the warmth of the restaurant faded as reality set back in. His heart sank as he stared at the letter, the cold reminder of his failure gnawing at him. How could he face Emily now? She deserved stability, comfort, and security, none of which he could provide. But just as the despair threatened to overtake him, a thought sparked in his mind. The kindness he had experienced tonight, the connection he had felt with Maria, wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was always hope. He didn't have all the answers, but he had his daughter, and he had the strength to keep fighting for her. He picked up the phone, determined to reach out for help, to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it seemed. He owed it to Emily, and he owed it to himself. The new year had arrived, and with it, a new chance to make things right. The first few days of the new year were a blur for Jack. The eviction notice weighed heavily on his mind, but he kept up a facade for Emily, making sure she didn't see the worry etched into his face. Every time she looked at him with those wide, trusting eyes, Jack couldn't help but feel the crushing pressure of wanting to do more, to be more for her. He worked late into the night, took on odd jobs, and did everything he could to keep a roof over their heads, but nothing seemed to move the needle. Maria's kindness lingered in Jack's mind, a flicker of warmth amidst the cold reality of his situation. But even as he clung to that hope, he knew that just a smile and a hot meal couldn't solve the mountain of problems he faced. The looming eviction, the growing debt, and the endless pressure to provide were far too much for him to overcome alone. One particularly cold evening, Jack returned home from work to find a small package waiting for him at his doorstep. It was an unmarked box, wrapped in simple brown paper. For a moment, he wondered if it was a mistake, if it had been delivered to the wrong address. But the handwriting on the tag was familiar, Maria. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Why would she send him something? They'd only met briefly, and he hadn't shared much about his situation with her, except for the brief moment of vulnerability at the restaurant. What could she possibly have sent him? Hesitantly, Jack opened the package. Inside, he found an envelope and a small, delicate key. The envelope was hand-addressed in Maria's neat script. His pulse quickened as he slid the paper out. Jack, I've been thinking about you a lot since you left the restaurant. I know you're struggling right now, but I believe there's a way out of your situation, and I want to help. This key opens a small apartment above the restaurant. It's fully furnished, and I've arranged for you to stay there for as long as you need. I want to give you the space to rebuild and focus on your daughter without the constant worry of an eviction. Please, take this opportunity and use it. It's a gift, no strings attached. Jack sat down on the steps of his apartment, staring at the key in his hand. He couldn't believe it. For the first time in ages, something good had happened, and it wasn't just a small act of kindness, it was an offer of salvation. But as much as he wanted to accept the offer, a wave of guilt washed over him. Maria didn't owe him anything. She didn't know him. He was just another face in the crowd. Why would she go so far to help him? He could hear Emily's voice in his mind, asking him when they would be able to move to a new place, a better place. The thought of providing her with stability and comfort filled him with a rush of hope, but the doubt quickly crept in. Was he worthy of such generosity? Did he deserve this chance? He spent the next few hours pacing, wrestling with his emotions. His mind kept returning to Maria's words, no strings attached. The key was real, and the offer seemed sincere, but Jack couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to the story. Who was Maria really? Why had she gone out of her way to help him like this? Was there a catch? And, more importantly, could he accept this kind of help without feeling like he was somehow failing? As the hours passed and Emily's laughter echoed from the other room, Jack found himself at a crossroads. He could stay in his crumbling apartment, continue to scrape by, and hope for a miracle, or he could take a leap of faith and move into the apartment above the restaurant. But that leap meant accepting help from a stranger, and Jack wasn't sure if he could do that without compromising his own sense of pride and independence. The next morning, Jack made his decision. He would go to the restaurant and speak with Maria. He had to know the truth, why she was offering this, and whether it was truly as simple as she said it was. He couldn't risk dragging Emily into something that might be a mistake. When he arrived at the restaurant, the smell of freshly baked bread and sizzling food greeted him, just like it had the night he met Maria. She was behind the counter, preparing an order, and she looked up in surprise when she saw Jack standing in the doorway. "Jack! I wasn't expecting you," Maria said, wiping her hands on a towel. She smiled, but there was a certain vulnerability in her eyes, as though she too were waiting for something. "I got your package," Jack said, his voice tight. He pulled the envelope from his coat pocket and placed it on the counter between them. "I have to ask you something. Why are you doing this for me? What's the catch?" Maria's smile faltered, and for the first time, Jack saw a flicker of something, an emotion he couldn't quite place. She hesitated before answering, her gaze lowering to the counter. "There's no catch, Jack," Maria said softly. "I know what it's like to struggle. I've been where you are. I've had moments when I didn't know how I was going to make it, when I thought I'd lost everything. But then something changed for me. I realized that the only way to survive is by helping others, by being there for people who need it most." Jack's heart skipped a beat. She had been where he was. He hadn't expected that. Maria had always seemed so strong, so sure of herself, that it never occurred to him she might have once been in the same position. She continued, her voice quiet but steady. "I didn't always own this restaurant. I used to be a waitress, struggling to make ends meet. And there was a time when I didn't think I would ever get out of it. But one person saw me, saw what I could be, and they helped me get back on my feet. They gave me a chance when I had nothing. So now, every year, I offer help to someone else who needs it, because I know how much it can change a person's life." Jack's mind raced as he processed her words. Maria had been where he was, and now, she was offering him the same chance someone had once given her. His skepticism slowly melted away, replaced by a deep sense of gratitude, and a realization. He wasn't just accepting charity, he was accepting an opportunity to change his life, just as Maria had done years ago. But just as he was about to thank her, something in Maria's expression shifted. She looked around the restaurant, as though making sure no one was listening, and leaned in closer. "Jack," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something you need to know. The person who helped me all those years ago, well, they're not who you think they are. The person who saved me was, well, it was my brother. And his name is Charles Hargrave." Jack froze. The name rang a bell, but he couldn't place it. "Charles Hargrave," he repeated, his voice barely audible. Maria nodded. "He's the one who gave me a loan to open this place. He's the reason I'm standing here today. And he's been watching you." Jack blinked, his mind reeling. "Watching me? What do you mean?" Maria's gaze hardened, a flicker of something darker crossing her face. "My brother runs a foundation that helps struggling families, people who need a fresh start. He's helped many people, people who were at rock bottom, just like you. But he's also very particular about who he helps. He doesn't just give out money or apartments without a reason. He believes in second chances, but he's not interested in charity for charity's sake. He's been following your story, Jack. He believes in you." Jack's heart pounded as the pieces started to fall into place. Maria wasn't just offering him a place to stay. She was giving him a chance to change his life through her brother's foundation, and Charles Hargrave was a name Jack had heard before. It was the name of the wealthy philanthropist whose organization had been making waves in the city for years, the one whose foundation had helped so many families in need. Jack had always thought of him as untouchable, someone who only helped the deserving. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined that someone like Charles Hargrave could be watching him, much less offering him a lifeline. This was no coincidence. Jack's life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet understand, but the road ahead was no longer clouded with uncertainty. The turning point had arrived. As the news sank in, Jack's mind was filled with conflicting emotions. The revelation about Maria's brother, Charles Hargrave, was more than just a surprise, it was a game-changer. For so long, Jack had been drowning in worry, trying to keep his head above water while struggling to make ends meet. Now, it seemed like an opportunity had landed right in his lap, but it came with a price he wasn't prepared for. He found himself sitting on a nearby bench outside the restaurant, his head in his hands. The gravity of the situation felt almost overwhelming. Could he accept help from a man like Charles Hargrave, the billionaire philanthropist known for his exacting standards and sharp business sense? Was this just another trap, another opportunity that came with hidden strings? Or was it truly the chance Jack had been waiting for, the one that could finally change his life, and Emily's, forever? After a few moments of silence, Maria joined Jack outside. Her face was tense, and she seemed more serious than she had ever been. "Jack," she said, "I know this is a lot to take in, but you have to understand what you're facing here. Charles isn't just some random guy offering you a place to stay. He's offering you a chance to make something of yourself, to take a leap that most people never get." "I don't know if I can do this, Maria," Jack said, his voice hoarse. "I've been let down so many times. I can't afford to get my hopes up again, only to have them dashed. And, what if I take his help, and it changes everything, and nothing really changes at all?" Maria placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that was both comforting and firm. "I get it, Jack. I know it's hard to trust, especially after everything you've been through. But this is different. Charles isn't asking for anything in return. He just wants to help. And you've got a chance here. You can start fresh. You can finally get that stability you and Emily need." "But what if it's a test?" Jack asked, looking up at her with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "What if he's just waiting for me to mess up, so he can pull the rug out from under me?" Maria nodded, understanding the fear in Jack's voice. "I thought the same thing when he offered to help me. But the truth is, sometimes people really do just want to do the right thing. And you deserve that chance, Jack. You deserve to have something good happen to you after everything you've been through." As the conversation continued, the weight of Jack's choices grew heavier. His mind kept returning to the apartment above the restaurant, a small space that felt like an oasis amidst the chaos of his life. It wasn't just an offer for shelter, it was a lifeline, a chance to move beyond the cramped apartment where Emily's toys were scattered across the floor, where Jack had spent nights wondering how he could pay the rent, where he felt suffocated by the walls closing in. He thought about Emily, the hope in her eyes whenever he mentioned their plans for the future. It had been so long since he'd made any promises, but he wanted to make this one for her, to give her the chance to experience a real home, a place where she didn't have to worry about their next meal or whether she would have enough time with her dad. Then, just as Jack was about to make his decision, Maria pulled out a small, yellowed envelope from her pocket. "I've been holding on to this for a long time," she said, handing it to Jack. "It's an old letter, something Charles left for me after we spoke one night. I never thought it would mean anything to anyone, but I think you need to see it." Jack opened the envelope, his hands trembling slightly. Inside, he found a letter, scrawled in a formal yet heartfelt tone. "Maria, I believe in second chances because I know what it means to need one. You showed me that, and now it's time to show others. I don't expect anything in return for my help, but I do expect you to understand one thing: not everyone gets this chance, and those who do should take it. I'm watching, and I'll be looking for someone who can surprise me, someone who can show me that the world isn't just about profit or power, but about hope and resilience. I'll know when I find that person." Jack's eyes widened as he read the words. They were candid, full of the weight of someone who had seen the world in 1,000 different ways, but still held on to the hope of helping those who deserved it. For a moment, he felt a pang of disbelief and relief. Charles wasn't looking for someone to impress him with grand gestures or fancy words. He was looking for honesty, for a glimmer of hope in a world full of jaded cynicism. "It sounds like he's asking for something that doesn't have to be perfect," Jack said, folding the letter and handing it back to Maria. "Just something real." Maria nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Exactly. You don't have to prove anything to him, Jack. All you have to do is take the chance, show up, and be yourself." The intensity of the moment was building, and Jack could feel the pressure mounting. This was the climax, the moment when he had to make a choice that would shape the rest of his life. Could he put aside his pride, his fear, and accept the hand that was being offered to him? "I'll do it," Jack said, his voice steady now, full of resolve. "I'll take the apartment, and I'll use it to make things right. I don't know what's on the other side, but it can't be worse than what I've been through." Maria's eyes lit up with relief, and she nodded. "That's all it takes, Jack. Just that one decision. And who knows? Maybe this is the start of something incredible." As he stepped into the small apartment above the restaurant, Jack felt a surge of emotions, fear, hope, relief, and uncertainty all mingled together. It wasn't perfect, but it was a place to rebuild, to start fresh. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt a sense of possibility, a sense that he could face the future without the weight of his past holding him back. He sent a quick text to Emily, telling her they would be moving into a new place, that they could finally have the space they deserved. Her reply came instantly, full of excitement and hope. "Dad! That's amazing! We can finally have our movie nights again." Jack couldn't help but smile, a small, hopeful smile that felt like the first real smile he had in months. The new year had arrived, and so had the opportunity he never thought he would get. For Jack, it was a chance to show the world that sometimes, even in the face of uncertainty, you could take a leap, and it could change everything. A small act of kindness that saved a struggling father on New Year's night. Weeks passed since Jack moved into the small apartment above Maria's restaurant, but the change in his life was already palpable. The weight of the eviction notice no longer hung over him, and for the first time in a long time, he could sleep without the constant anxiety that he might wake up to find his world falling apart. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was beginning to live again. The apartment, though modest, was a fresh start. It felt like a safe harbor, a place where he could breathe, focus, and plan a future with Emily. Every day, Jack woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He spent mornings helping Maria around the restaurant, learning the ropes of the business and picking up extra skills that would serve him well in the future. Maria's generosity hadn't been just a handout, it had been a chance for him to build something of his own. Slowly but surely, Jack's confidence began to return. He could see a path forward now, one that was no longer shrouded in uncertainty. One evening, as Jack sat at the small table in the apartment, sipping a cup of coffee and staring out the window at the city lights twinkling in the distance, Emily came running into the room, her eyes wide with excitement. "Dad, look! I made something for us." She handed him a small piece of paper, folded carefully in half. Jack unfolded it, and inside was a crayon drawing of a house with a bright sun and a tree in the yard. It was simple, but to Jack, it represented everything he had been working toward, the dream of giving Emily a home, a stable life, a future full of possibilities. "I love it," Jack said, a lump forming in his throat. He hugged her tightly, feeling an overwhelming surge of love and gratitude. "This is the best gift I've ever gotten." As Emily ran off to play with her toys, Jack's thoughts drifted back to the moments that had led him here, to the kindness of a stranger, the unexpected opportunity to start over, and the lessons he'd learned along the way. It hadn't been easy. The road to this moment had been paved with fear, doubt, and the constant worry of falling short. But now, sitting in the apartment with his daughter, Jack could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. He remembered the first night he'd walked into the restaurant, uncertain and skeptical of Maria's offer. He remembered how, despite the overwhelming challenges in his life, Maria had seen something in him, something worth saving. And it wasn't just the apartment that had changed his life. It was the belief that someone out there believed in him, even when he hadn't believed in himself. Maria's words echoed in his mind, "Sometimes people really do just want to do the right thing. And you deserve that chance, Jack. You deserve to have something good happen to you after everything you've been through." He realized now how much those words had meant to him. They had been the push he needed, the reminder that kindness, no matter how small, could change someone's entire world. As Jack sat there, reflecting on his journey, he thought about Charles Hargrave. He hadn't met the man yet, but the lessons from Maria and her brother had been clear: help others without expecting anything in return. It was a philosophy Jack now fully embraced. He'd learned the hard way that life wasn't just about struggling to survive, it was about building connections, helping others when you could, and embracing the opportunities that came your way, even when they seemed too good to be true. A few weeks later, Jack received an unexpected phone call. It was Maria, calling with good news. "I talked to Charles," she said, her voice full of excitement. "He wants to meet you. He's been watching you, Jack, he believes in what you're doing, and he wants to offer you something." Jack's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea what Charles Hargrave could possibly want from him, but he knew this could be another turning point in his life. He agreed to meet Charles the next day, and when he arrived at the upscale office building, he felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. The man who had helped Maria and so many others was now extending his hand to Jack. Charles was exactly how Jack had imagined, a polished, professional figure with an air of quiet authority. But as soon as they shook hands, Jack felt a warmth in Charles's gaze, an understanding that went beyond business or philanthropy. "I've been keeping an eye on you, Jack," Charles said with a slight smile. "I can see the changes in you. You've started something here, and I believe you can do more with the opportunities we've discussed. But there's one thing I want to make clear: this isn't about me, and it's not about money. It's about the choices you make from here on out. You've proven that you have the character to succeed, and that's the kind of person I want to help." Jack's throat tightened as he listened. It wasn't the money that meant anything, it was the belief that someone with the power to change lives was offering him a chance. A real chance. The kind of chance that, when embraced, could transform a person's future. A few weeks later, Jack found himself standing outside the newly opened family shelter, a project that Charles Hargrave's foundation had funded, and one that Jack was now deeply involved in. He had been given the resources, guidance, and mentorship he needed to not only rebuild his life but to help others in the same position he had once been in. Jack wasn't just a beneficiary of kindness anymore, he was now a part of something bigger, something that would allow him to pay forward the help he had received. Standing there, with Emily at his side, Jack watched as a group of families moved into the shelter. He could feel the excitement, the hope, and the relief radiating from them. For many, it was the first step toward rebuilding their own lives, just as it had been for him. Jack's heart swelled with pride as he realized that his story had come full circle. What had started as an act of kindness from a stranger had led him to a place where he could now offer that same kindness to others. The full impact of Maria and Charles's generosity had rippled through his life, and now, he was the one who could make a difference. In that moment, Jack understood something profound: kindness, no matter how small, creates a chain reaction that has the power to change lives. He had been saved by the kindness of others, and now it was his turn to pass it on. No longer was he just a man struggling to survive, he was someone who had learned that by lifting others up, we lift ourselves higher. As the sun dipped below the horizon and Emily tugged at his hand, Jack felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was filled with promise. Jack had found his place, not just in the world, but in a community of people who believed in the power of kindness, generosity, and second chances. And as they walked into the shelter, Jack smiled. This was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where he could build a life that wasn't defined by his struggles, but by his capacity to give back and help others rise from the ashes of their own challenges. The future, at last, felt wide open. This story is a reminder that kindness can be transformative, whether it's the small gesture of offering help to a stranger or the courage to accept it when it's given. No act of kindness is too small to change someone's life. Sometimes, it only takes one person believing in us to turn everything around, and in doing so, we can find the strength to help others and create a better world for ourselves and those around us.